So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about CITP, chartered membership as a whole, how it fits into the industry, what we're trying to do with it, and why we've changed some parts of it, but also put everything in a bit of a context. Because I'd never be invited, if I worked at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, I'd never be invited there to come in and talk about chartered status, because it's completely part of their industry, part of their profession, and there's no cause for having to tell them about it. And the same with accountants, really. But we have this issue, I think, in the IT profession. We have several issues, this being one of them. And I wanted to come and talk to you about why we've done what we've done and put it in some sort of professionalism type context. So what I do is I tend to go out and talk to major employers. I run our relationships with significant other organisations. That's really what the professionalism piece is about. It doesn't mean that I'm just talking to clients who have a commercial relationship with us. I talk to major organisations that are strategically important, I think, to the maturity of the IT profession. This is everything from major government institutions, central government, cabinet office, government IT profession, through to major organisations. So I was with IBM for most of the day today, Accenture, all the big organisations that you'd expect me to be talking to, but also stuff in innovation and entrepreneurship, developing SMEs and that sort of market, which of course is incredibly important to the profession as a whole. So what I want to do is share a few things that I've learnt talking to clients and companies alike about the IT profession and the perception of the IT profession within that sort of environment, and then lead us on to talk about a few things that we've done to try and deal with some of these issues and some of these problems. So the first thing I've got up here is really something that comes from Gartner. What made IT successful in the past is not what will make IT successful in the future. It's a statement that not everyone agrees with, but it's something that has chimed with me as I've gone in to talk to major organisations. And I can think about organisations that seem particularly mature in their marketplace. People like Visa and MasterCard. Visa and MasterCard seem like an incredibly mature marketplace where there's 50% Visa, 50% MasterCard, and never the twain shall meet. And everything's going along fine and hunky-dory. And then PayPal arrives on the scene. And what is the impact of PayPal on these organisations? It's absolutely fundamental to their business model. And the reaction of those organisations to this new challenge, this new opportunity and this new threat driven by technology, I think is profound. I think companies like Visa and MasterCard would probably say that they are technology companies now. I know we think of them purely in terms of credit cards, but actually they are. They are technology companies. If you don't believe the CIO, Steve Chambers, who's the CIO at Visa Europe, if he challenged the board, if you don't believe that they work for a technology company, then let him switch all the systems off and see how long they last for. There's new ways of working, so you can see IT people taken out of traditional roles within Visa and empowered to think about new things that are going to impact their profession. PayPal was a shock. What next is coming that we can position ourselves around to get ahead of the curve and see it as an opportunity? Would our clients, for example, be satisfied or even be comfortable with us injecting chips into their arms so that when they walk past the tills, things get paid for? It's quite a major effect. Muggers would be a very scary bunch. They've all got chainsaws. That would be, but there's major implications there with regards to the technology and the security. Increasingly, I think CEOs, chief executives, are understanding that IT is not, or those companies that are doing it well, IT is not just a cost centre. IT is about innovation, it's about entrepreneurship, and it's about information. And if you don't hold these things close to your heart, then you're going to get in severe problems in the future. And that's especially true, I think, with outsourcing and offshoring, which is another tangent that sometimes I go and talk about. I didn't make myself very popular with the airline industry, which is a shame because my dad was an airline pilot, so I was looking forward to big things there. My dad's a ex-Red Arrows pilot, fast jet instructor and tactical weapons instructor, went on to be an airline pilot. Try growing up as his son, it's not all, But anyway, so it's a bit of a boy's own hero, and I went to talk to this industry about outsourcing and offshoring, and I said, make sure that what you outsource is that which is common across the industry, and you keep close to your chest that which differentiates you from the competition and how you talk to your clients. So as long as you've outsourced the aeroplane bit and kept in-house your internet, you'll be absolutely fine. That didn't go down very well. There is a serious point with that, though, of course, that IT is often in organisations seen as a cost centre, something to be outsourced and dictated to, because it's very much seen as a commodity. And I think this has got implications for the maturity of our profession. The changing role of IT, I would argue, requires a new set of competencies. It's not just about being brilliant at IT, it's about exploiting that IT for the objectives of the organisation. And you need to have other skills. You need to be able to communicate, something that I'm stammering my way through this evening. But you need to be able to communicate with people and get your point across without just talking in jargon terms, but talking in business terms, which is usually the language of finance. But these are skills that professionals, I think, need, and these are traits of really good IT professionals. They can influence organisations, get them to understand the benefits of what they're about, and then go and actually implement it and do it. That's a key part of it. You can't talk about strategy if you can't keep the lights on, of course. I'm not saying that you should just ignore that, but I've seen organisations where some of that lights on stuff is more and more getting delegated to another function. So there's a CIO at Colt Telecoms was telling me that they spend 2 or 3 days a week out looking and talking to potential partners in the future about what new technologies and their impact and what they might have on their market. But also things like, if you bring your laptop to work, if you bring whatever you own to work and use that system, we need a firewall that's comfortable with that. But at the same time, is that a facilities issue? Is the desktop and running of those sorts of items, is that just facilities? Is that IT? Which I thought was quite a bold statement, really. Sort of we done, and are we relevant? There's an interesting question. I think we really, as BCS, are a microcosm of what's happening in the profession. It's up to us, I think, to prove our relevance with everything that we do. And I think that's important as well out in the employment marketplace, where as IT professionals, you've got to show what you can do for that organisation, and then show to that organisation how you can change stuff for the better. And that, I think, leads to a much more interesting career. And that's really what we should be about. We have worked hard to look at CITP, Chartered IT Professional, and all our chartered membership to make sure that it is relevant to today's workplace. And I think professionalism is not about us making sure that people don't do stuff. It's making sure that we do as much as we possibly can and set that within the context of the organisation. This is not to shackle people, but this is really to set IT free. There are lots of rogue departments out there, and I see that as a symptom of us not being always taken seriously. I remember I went to an event where a public sector event where there were people up speaking who were seen as exemplars of what had happened. There were lots of floods in Gloucestershire, and Gloucestershire County Council were up there, one of these departments, saying, it's brilliant, cloud and all the rest of it, and having software as a service, because it allows us to keep running our systems even though the actual building itself was closed down. And that was wonderful. So the CIO, were they really sort of helping you with that? Oh, no, we just did it ourselves. We don't go to IT for those kinds of solutions because they're just in charge of servers. We do want to do all this new stuff. We want to do social media. We want to get involved with all these new technologies. And that's not something traditionally that people go to the IT department for. But where else would you go for that expertise? And why is it that people who are coming through school and university at the moment, who are really engaged in these technologies, don't see computer science and don't certainly see a career in IT as something that's suitable for them? I think there's lots of things in there to glass ceilings with CIOs on the board. I think there's lots of things as well to do with, I haven't got time to explore all of them, but maybe have a chat afterwards, but chief executives are still slightly bemused in that was Y2K the best investment they ever made, or with the IT department pulling the wool over their eyes again. There's other things as well. The marketing department is still a bit cross because the first time around in the dot-com boom, when they decided they were going to be the evangelical team in charge of e-commerce and it all fell about their ears, again, the IT department, did they get set up by the IT team? I think we're moving now into a much more mature market where these new technologies are embedded in organisations, and it's up to us to make sure that we are the gatekeepers, if you like, of these new technologies. Very quickly then, what I wanted to just chat about was these 4 things: the maturity model of professions, engagement with employers, government as a policymaker, and global standards. Just to give you a flavour of some of the things that we've been doing. Maturity of professions. This is the Carnegie Mellon maturity model. We think IT is somewhere between levels 1 and 2, somewhere between organised and vaguely qualified, somewhere down there. And what I mean by this, if I can give you an example, my wife is a chartered surveyor. She's actually a chartered building surveyor. The specialism is not important. And everything that Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors is about is up there in the established levels, 4 and 5. And I think that's where we need to get to as a profession. That sort of recognition and that standing, not just in the business community, but amongst the lay population. So we get recognised and valued in the same way that you all have a picture in your head about what surveyors bring. But do lay people have an idea of what IT professionals bring? And usually it's about government overspend and overrun and project management. It's a bit flippant comment, but that is sometimes the perception. And of course we're much more important than that. The reason, of course, we don't have hundreds of years to just sit around and wait for this stuff to get better is the absolutely critical nature of IT and ICT to today's society, not just in a business context, but perhaps more importantly as a citizen. Public sector, cybersecurity, IT security, all these kind of privacy, all these things, use of social networking, explosion of Web 2.0, and what's going to happen next. These are absolutely critical to people's lives, the quality of life in this country, and our ability to do business in the future. That's why it's important. That's why I think we should be recognised as a profession, and that's why I think it's imperative that we behave as one. Engagement with employers then, this is again the CITP piece. If you take my argument that we are absolutely critical, why is it that membership, qualifications, a badge that shows experience is not absolutely demanded by employers? Well, we've gone out of our way, certainly with regards to the CITP piece, to make sure that it is as rigorous as it needs to be for employers to take it seriously, so that it says something about the individual that the employer would not easily be able to go out and find out about for themselves. I think that's a critical piece. We need to provide this service, if you like, as a professional body, not only to employers but most importantly to our membership. We need to make sure that there is value to the post-nominals. So there's value to MBCS and CITP, FBCS, every CNC site, that there is real currency. And I think if there is any value to membership, it should really be measured in those terms. What is the currency of your post-nominals? So I'm doing all that I can in our engagement with employers to make sure that there is a currency. And that's two-pronged. I want to engage with employers because there's a volume market there. Obviously, that's why I go to all the big companies that you'd expect me to. But at the same time, I want to show them the value of Chartered IT Professional, MBCS, Chartered Engineer and Chartered Scientist, and why it can have a positive impact on their bottom line. And that's a very major part of my role. Government as policymaker then, they are a key stakeholder at the top of the IT employment ecosystem. We were in front of the Public Administration Select Committee talking about major government contracts that are going to a small group of consultancies. I think government can change the landscape. They're uniquely positioned to change the landscape overnight. They can do that through their procurement procedures. They want people to demonstrate people's professionalism, and what would that look like? What sort of certification, qualification regime would that look like? It must be an open regime of qualifications and standards before government is going to promote it, and that's why we've done quite a lot of work with regards to licensing Chartered IT Professionals as a standard to other organisations. It's also why we take on board CEng and CSci, just so that we can provide a service and a broad range and a breadth to our members. Of course, government could change things overnight by making us a regulated profession. This is something I would probably want to shy away from, but you can see their impact. And their impact is not just with the Accenture's, Capgeminis of this world. If there is an adopted standard, often even in the SME community, they want to show that they are just as good, if not better, as the big boys, and therefore they will adopt a standard too. You've seen that with ITIL and other areas. I think it's incredibly important for us going forward that we engage with government and make sure that they value, again, post-nominals and what it is we're trying to achieve in this space. That's why we're engaged with Ian Watmore's team, government IT profession, changing that sort of capability with Leslie Hume and all of that team. But we're engaged with them almost certainly on a weekly basis to try and influence this landscape. Global standards then. So if it is a global profession, and I believe it is, then there will be, again, another measurement will be the take-up of this standard internationally. Now, CEng and CSci certainly have a certain catchment internationally. It's growing, but it remains quite small, and we want to do the same with Chartered IT Professional. We've recently announced we've licensed the standard lock, stock and barrel to the Irish Computer Society. We want to do more. We are in talks with the IET about them taking on CITP, and there are other people throughout Europe who want to talk to us about licensing CITP as well. We think this is important because we think we need to put the standard out there rather than have us trying to control its development and its take-up around the world. It's actually, we can't just sit in an ivory tower and dictate. We want people to engage with the standard, and we want as many people as possible to get involved with it. And that is why we've decided that the best policy is to license it out to other people. And we've certainly got some real traction in the market with that. T-shaped professional, I wanted to tell you a little bit about why we developed CITP in the way that we did, and really this is just my last point. I'm conscious that time is of the essence. A T-shaped professional, I think, is an important model with all of the standards here, but especially with CITP. And by a T-shaped model of professionalism or of a professional, what I mean is a professional is T-shaped in that they have a broad but relatively shallow range of knowledge across the profession. and this is underpinned by deep wells of competency. That's how we develop the standard, and you'll see that when the guys talk to you in a bit more in depth about the assessments themselves. But we do that, we assess that by having a breadth of knowledge test, which is the breadth piece, and then we have our peer review interviews, which is this deep wells of competency. And that's how we go about the assessment. And if you're wondering why, that's the model upon which it's built, this idea of a T-shaped professional. Now, there might be more drops down from the T. You might be specialisms in more areas, and that's absolutely fine. But that's the sort of model that we've tried to adopt when it comes to developing this standard. And I hope you see that, and that comes through in some of the assessments. I will be around this evening. Those are really the points I wanted to say. I wanted to say that we, BCS, are trying very hard, and it's a major priority for us to make sure that all of the post-nominals that we have, CEng, FBCS, MBCS, and BCS, have real currency in the market. Because I think that's the only way that we can be judged, and the only measure upon which we can be judged in the future. It's all very well, I think, talking about member benefits, but to me that is the real and most tangible one, and something we're working towards all the time. I wanted to assure you that that's one of our major priorities. Thank you very much.
I'm Mike Underwood. Seems a long time ago, in 1991, I started off as a physicist. I went along to become a noise and vibration expert. Unfortunately, I then decided I wanted to do a PhD externally, and the existing computer wasn't very good, software wasn't good, so I picked up a book called McCracken, Fortran for Engineers, and I taught myself. So I then got my PhD, but I did so much computing that I then went to work with the vehicle safety people. I was at TRL, taught them how to process all their crash results. About that time, I then joined the BCS, and in those days I came in straight away as a chartered member and a CEng, which was quite good. Somewhere along the line, I joined Berkshire branch and ended up chairman. And one of the guys on there said, well, how about coming along to be an assessor? So I went along to see what it was all about. Then I started. I thought, well, I wasn't really capable of assessing people. I mean, I'm not much better than anybody else, but I tried. I then got to membership committee. I got CSI because they wanted somebody to assess CSI, and they didn't have anybody. I was number one in the BCS to get it, and I got a bottle of champagne from Dave Clark. So fellowship in the membership committee, I said, well, I was sitting next to the then fellow chairman. I said, well, I don't think I could actually get fellowship. He said, well, look what you've done, try it. Next meeting he said, well, you're a fellow now, please go along and assess. So that's what I got. The Engineering Council and the Science Council are licensed to award IEng and CEng, and we define as defined by Sapphire Plus. So you have to have your skills defined in there. This always amused me. The first IEng and CEng are the same but different. That came in about 2000 when they brought in IEng. And basically what the Engineering Council wanted to do is to say, well, IEng is the same level as CEng. And they're still doing it. I was at a workshop last year, I think. They were going to promote IEng a bit more. The difference is CEng must be capable of innovation and development. An IEng isn't. He will use existing tools. CEng would plan a project and direct it, whereas an IEng may manage and help to get the project running. For an IEng, you need an accredited bachelor's or honours degree. Otherwise, you can take the technical report option. I'll talk about that afterwards. For CEng, you need an accredited honours degree, like an IEng, and a master's degree, or an MEng. Again, you take the technical report option if you haven't got either. We look at the compasses. They're assessed according to EC UK, which is this little document you can get off the web. If you want to know whether your degree is accredited, there are two websites you can look at. First one's the BCS website, and the second is the Engineering Council. You used to do the IEng and CEng together so you could compare, but now they're separate things. The BCS will look at and like Keith said, you send your CV in and we look at it to see if you're in the right Sapphire skills. and then we pass you through. This is a description of the criteria for the award of CEng. You've got to maintain and extend a sound theoretical approach and engage in creative, again, innovative development of engineering. Some of these are common to iEng, but it's the creative and the innovative bit, which is a CEng. The last thing is CPD. Now, what we do is there's an initial review, which can take up to 12 weeks. The quality of submission, we mean the CV. Quite a lot of time, people just shove us just any old CV. Well, it would be nice to actually tailor your CV to what the competencies are in the EC UK document. It would simplify the process quite a lot. That happens also with fellow. Just make it our job easier. So if you've got an accredited degree and a master's degree, and the master's degree came in since 1999. Before that, you just had to have an accredited honours degree. If you have that, the assessors could take up to 8 weeks to look at your papers, and then you go to an interview with 2 assessors, both are CEng, and then you get the results in 2 to 3 weeks. Now, if you haven't got an accredited degree or a master's, you're on to the technical report option. Now, the technical report is about 5,000 words. And it's supposed to be the same level as a master's degree. So that's your place to your master's that way. You've got 30 days to write the synopsis, and then we take about 8 weeks to review it. But that depends, isn't it, for when we can organise the interview, and we don't take 8 weeks to assess it. Then you've got to write the technical report. It must be received within 6 months. Then we review the technical report. We might come back to you and say, well, we're not quite happy about that. Perhaps you ought to edit it a bit or change it. So then we get the technical report and we're satisfied with it. And then you get an interview, first on the technical report and then on your composites for EC UK. Each of those lasts about 3/4 of an hour, so you're into a 1.5 hour interview. It's done on the same tape. Again, the results can take 2 to 3 weeks. Now, the Charter of Scientists is the same process really. You need an accredited honours degree and a master's degree. There aren't many accredited honours. They're trying to bring it in. It's because it's so new. So 9% of the time now you'd have to do a technical report. It's essential to realise it's got scientists and science all the way through it. I'm not being facetious, because we get people that say, oh, can I have CSci and CEng right away? And it doesn't quite work out that way. And equally, when we're actually looking for CEng, they have to be doing some sort of computing. It's no good sending us something on food science or something. That has happened. What I've done here is just distilled the criteria for the award of CSI. Scientific method comes up, appropriate subject knowledge, communicate effectively, self-direction, originality, operating at professionalism level. It's similar to a certain extent to CEng, but CEng is probably a bit more detailed. Again, the initial review can take up to 12 weeks. If you can tailor your CV to show that you're a scientist, that would be helpful. If you've got an accredited degree and an MSc, you'll get an interview within 8 weeks, but of course you're down to the technical report option if you haven't got an accredited degree. Again, it's 30 days to write a synopsis. At the top there is a guidance notes that you get if you apply. That describes what should be in the technical report. Again, you've got 8 weeks to review the synopsis. Technical report must be received within 6 months, and the assessor review is 8 weeks. So again, interviewed by 2 assessors. In fact, only one needs to be CSci. That's what happened. There aren't so many around. I don't know how many we got, 20? We have a problem that Science Council decided to everybody had to revalidate their CV in once a year, which is either 15% or 20%. So we're actually now revalidating everybody once a year. So not quite so good. Now that was my slide show. Any questions?
Right, good evening. My name's Keith Taylor, and I'm going to carry on from where Adam left off, talk about Sophia Plus and CITP. A little bit about me first. I used to work for IBM. I've worked for IBM most of my life as a designer, both a technical designer and a technical specialist, a product planner as well. As far as the qualifications are concerned, I'm a CITP under the old school. I'll talk about that a bit in a minute. A chartered engineer and a fellow of the BCS. I'm now retired from IBM, but I do voluntary work, mainly assessment of CITP, sorry, not CITP particularly, but the chartered engineer and fellowship. And I also do some other work for the BCS. In fact, today I've just come from talking to a college about the BCS. Now, when I was at the college, as a matter of fact, I presented this chart. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all the charts I presented at the college, but I did want to just share this one with you, which is about the general qualities that we might expect as you go through the IT profession. The first obvious one is the technical skills. You expect everyone to be good technically, to learn at college or wherever, all the technical things you need to. But there are a number of other things that we look for at different stages of the profession. And the first three I would expect to find in any member, quite honestly. Technical skills, autonomy and professionalism. Those are the sorts of things that hopefully everyone here has already got. The next three, the good communication, business awareness and influence and innovation, are things that we look for particularly at the chartered level, and I'll talk much more about those in a minute. And the last two are things that you would expect more in a fellow of the society, and I'll mention fellowship a bit later on. So let's start by talking about the CITP. And according to the website, I just copied this off the website, and which I knew anyway, that you need three different stages of assessment. The first one is that we assess you against your education and experience, and one of the first things it mentions is that you have to be Sophia Plus level 5 or above. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sophia Plus, but I'm going to talk a bit about that as well to explain what it is for those of you who don't know what it is. The second thing, which Adam already mentioned, was the breadth of knowledge test, which is a 75-question multiple choice test, which is actually quite difficult. I did try it myself and I just scraped the pass mark, but it isn't easy. And specialist competence, that's the interview with two peers to find out your specialist knowledge, and I'll talk a bit more about that as well. Now, Adam's already shown you more or less what's in this slide, which is what businesses want from us in our CITP certification. Why should they believe it, if you like? And the one I like best actually is that the CITP status should tell us something about the holder that we cannot easily find out for ourselves. I know quite a few women that would like to have that for their husbands as well, but unfortunately we don't do that with CITP. And the last one there, the process of achieving CITP should be rigorous, and there should be some form of periodic revalidation. We are looking at revalidation as well as part of CITP. So if you look at the flow chart, I know you can't see this from the back, just to show you the overview of the flow chart, it's a three-stage process. Stage one is a review of your application. Stage two is the breadth of knowledge test. And stage three is that interview with two of your peers. And then, assuming that you pass all those, you get the certificate of competence for 5 years. So what do you need to apply? Well, you need your current CV or resume. If that hasn't got enough detail in it, we would look for a personal statement detailing your experience in more painstaking way. But basically the CV is normally fine. There's some payment and then details of one or more supporters who can validate your application. And we do look quite carefully at what the supporters say about you. So having done the application, then we push paperwork onto the stage one assessment, and I'll explain how that is done. So the initial stage one criteria are that you have to be working 3 out of the last 5 years at Sophia Plus level 5, and here's the Sophia Plus coming in again. Now, just to try and summarise what that is, There are 4 different facets of Sophia. One is autonomy, one is influence, one is complexity or technical skills, and the 4th one is business skills. And I'll go through each of those in turn. But just before I do that, I'll talk a little bit about Sophia itself. Some of you may have picked up this form on your way in, and as wet as that when you picked it up. That's a summary of the Sophia classification, and I'll show you that again in a minute. So Sophia Plus is a framework. It actually stands for the Skills Framework for the Information Age, and it comes from the Sophia Foundation, of which BCS is one of the founding members. It defines 86 skills down the chart there, and that's broken down into 290 tasks within those skills. A lot of detail there. Sophia is continually being refined. In fact, currently the BCS is working on Sophia Level 5, which is the follow-on to the one we've got at the moment. Now, Sophia Plus defines a number of levels. They're across the top here on the form, and they're number 1 to 7. Number 1 is a very junior level, and number 7 is the fellowship, or very senior level. And we would expect fellows, for example, to be at the top there, but for the CITP, we expect people to be at level 5, so that's quite high up. If you look on the website, as members you're allowed to look at the CITP definitions in detail, and you will find a detailed definition of those 4 different facets of level 5. I'm going to just go through them a bit now to tell you what you need. So the first one is autonomy, and that means that you don't have to get told from every minute of the day what to do. You basically work under broad direction, make up your own mind about what to do. You're accountable for your own work, and you receive assignments in the form of objectives, not do this, do that, but we're trying to achieve this. It does say here that you define team objectives. You don't actually have to be a team leader or manager, but you do need to have a contribution to the team, and the other members of the team need to rely on you. And work is often self-initiated, so work needs to be done without being told, as I say, exactly what to do. So that's autonomy. The next one is influence. Now, if you're a manager, for example, then you'd certainly have quite a lot of influence. You'd be influencing other people in the organisation, but you don't have to be a manager. You could be just a technical person who's got some influence on either members of your team or customers or whoever. It says again that you need to be responsible for the work of others, but you don't have to be the manager. You could just be responsible in the sense that if your work failed, then the whole team might collapse because they were relying on you to do your bit. Decisions that impact on assigned projects, that's similar sort of things that you need to make sure that you've got deadlines and budgets and things. And develop business relationships. Now, there's a lot more about business coming on in a moment, but that's that you need to be able to deal with customers. The third thing is complexity or technical skills, and this is the sort of thing you'd expect. It requires the use of fundamental principles. You work on a variety of technical problems, and you understand the relationship between your own specialism and the wider organisational requirements. Now, this is coming back to what Adam was saying about the T skills. You need to have the broad understanding of what the whole organisation does, and then understand how your own specialist subjects fit in that whole organisation. And the last of the 4 is business skills. That's split into 2 parts. The first part is that you advise on available standards in your own line of work. So this would be perhaps quality standards or document retention or security standards, whatever your own line of work is. And the second part is that you've got a clear understanding of the relationship between your area and other people's and the business side of the organisation. This is most important. You need to understand what the business is doing and what the business requires, and then fit your work to solve that business problem. The second part of business skills is the more conventional sort of thing that you would learn perhaps in an MBA class or something like that you can analyse business problems, you can plan for using project planning and costing and things like that. You can communicate effectively, you can demonstrate leadership, and you can analyse user requirements. And the last one here demonstrates creativity, and that's something we particularly look for in chartered engineer and chartered scientists, which Mike will talk about in a minute. So those are the 4 things that you need in Sophia Level Plus. Now, on this chart, the skills are divided up into a number of areas. First one's strategy and architecture, second one's business change, and so on. As far as the specialist subjects are concerned that the BCS looks for, they're down the left-hand side here where it says CIT specialisms. Now, if you are applying for CITP, the thing that you must get right is which CIT specialism you think you're in. And it's actually quite easy to get this wrong. So what you need to do is find your job, or perhaps you've got more than one job, but your main job in the Sophia list of 84, was it? This huge list here. You need to find your job in that list and then find which group it's in, and that's the way you identify which of the CIT specialisms you're in. You might otherwise make a mistake. You might think, well, I'm a manager, therefore I'm on portfolio management. That's not necessarily the case, as I'll show you in a moment. So here's just one of the sections, the solution development and implementation section, and you see I've circled at the top there management. Now where it says systems development management, that does really mean you're a manager. You're managing a team of people who are developing a system. But if you look too further down from that, it says requirements definition of management. It doesn't mean management of people, that means management of requirements. So you have to be quite careful with Sophia Plus when it says management, whether you're talking about people management or managing requirements or whatever. And in fact, in solution development, this top one is the only people management one that's specifically for managers. You can see on the top row there that it goes up to level 7, and it starts at level 5. Now that's good news. So if you are a system development manager, you're almost certain to be working at level 5 anyway, so you're in with a good chance of getting through the first stage of the Sophia. Some of the others don't go up so high. Stage 2 of the process then is the breadth of knowledge test, and we've already mentioned this. It's a test comprising 75 multiple choice questions, and you have to get a fairly good mark. It's more than half, I think, on that. And you must achieve the pass mark either at the first attempt, or you're allowed one more go at it if you fail. If you don't pass the second attempt, you have to wait another 6 months to resit it. Now, stage 3 of the process is this review by 2 peers, and that takes about an hour, or getting on for an hour. You're expected to provide a short presentation to start with, which should take about 10 minutes, and then you're interviewed by the 2 assessors, at least one of whom will know about your chosen subject. During the interview, you need to provide specific evidence relating to your Sophia Plus level. In practice, what happens is that they can more or less assess that without asking you very specific questions, but they might have to ask you questions. So that's the stage 3 interview. So those are the 3 stages. Now the other thing I just want to mention here is about fellowship, since I happen to be the chairman of fellowship. There are 3 criteria for fellowship. The first one is, are you working at level 7, which is basically a very senior job, which typically would have 50 plus people working for you, or a budget of about £5 million or more, so you'd have a pretty senior role. Or, and notice this is an or, not an and, or do you have an international reputation for being an expert in your field? That's the authority one. Or are you a very well respected proponent of IT? You don't have to be a real expert on it, but if you're somebody who's always saying good things about IT, and in perhaps a local community and elsewhere, then again that's well thought of, and you can be elected to fellow on that. So there's 3 ways of getting fellowship. You can have a combination of these, or you can have any one of them. Just to give you a few statistics, I looked up the total proportion of fellows. There's about 4% of fellows of BCS. The MBCSs are about 67%, and the rest are students and other grades. The C-Eng and I-Eng is about 9%. The C-Sci, a very small number, less than 1%. The CITP up to 2009. Now, I don't know if you remember, but way back when we joined the BCS, to become members, we had to already be somewhat higher level than you do today. And those people were awarded CITP in about 2004, I think. So you've got a huge raft of people that got CITP via that route, plus some more who got it via the old CITP process. So the 27% of membership is under the old CITP, but the new one, which has got that process that I've just described to you, which is the only way to get CITP now, has again got less than 1% so far, but it is rising. So that's a summary of the membership statistics. Just to summarise my whole talk, if you're working at Sophia level 5 or above, if you have autonomy, influence and business skills, and the technical skills as well, of course, do you have the breadth of IT knowledge? Do you have specialist knowledge in your own particular subject? And do you use all of these in your job? It's no good just knowing the subject. You actually have to be working in IT, I'm afraid, to have CITP. You can't just be a theorist. If that's yes, then you could be CITP too.